My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you are interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
On this episode, we will speak with Dr. David Rhoiney. Dr. Rhoiney is the model of success, but his path was far from easy. He is a minority physician who clearly demonstrates that strength of will and hard work can overcome any hardship. He attended the U.S. Naval Academy before graduating from A.T. Still University College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2014 and becoming a general surgeon. Dr. Rhoiney is currently stationed in Guantanamo Bay and serves as the lieutenant commander in the Navy, but before any of his academic achievements, he survived on the streets. We hope you enjoy the story of how Dr. Rhoiney persevered through all odds to get to where he is today.
All right, Dr. Rhoiney, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Do you mind? Is it okay if I call you David? Is that all right?
Perfect.
All right, and please call me Ian, David, as we go through. Keep it friendly, right?
Will do.
All right. So, David, you're a general surgeon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we usually start just by, and again, we have some pre-meds here. So if you can keep it a little simple for us, and I'm a gastroenterologist, so I'm not that versed either, right? Right. So can you tell us about your day today, or maybe a recent day where you give us an idea of what you do, starting from when you wake up in the morning?
So my day is interesting because I am currently overseas with the military, and I'm the sole surgeon for roughly 7,000 people. So I am literally the guy who gets called for hand injuries, complex lacerations, bleeding, GI issues as far as diarrhea, constipation, screening colonoscopies, just overall question, this looks funny on the skin. So as a general surgeon, it requires me to be the jack of all trades.
Where are you stationed, David? Tell us where you are.
So I'm currently stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
So is that a crazy place? That's like Few Good Men. You watch all these movies. They're always in Guantanamo Bay.
Well, those are fantasized, right? There's a dramatized, but it's not like that. Let me put the caveat: my views expressed here are not that of the military. I do not represent the United States Navy in this matter. These are the views only and solely expressed by myself. It's just a normal Caribbean island. We just happen to be in Cuba.
Wow. So is it nice there? Is the weather nice? The palm trees beautiful?
It is so I'm originally from Hawaii, and it is the bluest water you've ever seen in your life. You can literally some days see down, if you're out in the middle of the water, probably 60, 70 feet before it starts to get murky.
If you're going to get stationed somewhere, it doesn't sound like a terrible place to be. Is that right?
It's not a terrible place to be.
That's nice.
Not a terrible place to be. It's weather's nice all the time, except for when hurricanes come through.
Minor point, right? Minor point.
Minor point.
All right, David. So you're a surgeon. You're in Guantanamo Bay. You kind of, at the top of your game. You're the only surgeon for the whole base. That is incredible. But we're going to start now as a kid. Can you tell me? And now let me just say also, I've listened to a couple of podcasts that you've done. One was Minority Money, and the other one was Explore the Space. So I know a little bit of your story, and it's incredible. And Dr. Wilson totally respects you and gave me a short list of people to interview, and you were on it, which I think is quite an accolade in and of itself.
So I love Dr. Wilson. She's amazing. We'll always love Dr. Wilson. So I did not always want to be a doctor, just flat off the bat. I didn't even know I could be a doctor. It wasn't by accident, right? Because God ultimately has a plan for us all. But I didn't necessarily have the traditional, hey, I saw doctors growing up. No, I went to doctors who we couldn't afford. And all of them were white males, or I think I had one white female doctor, or the orthopedic surgeon who fixed my hand was from, I think, India or Pakistan. I can't really remember. But I had never seen an African-American physician it's an interesting scenario. And as a kid, I was just trying to survive. I actually wanted to, at one point, I wanted to be a judge, and another point, I wanted to be an astronaut. But I never came up thinking I was going to be a doctor, let alone a surgeon. I can just flat out tell you that.
So now your dad was in the military, is that right?
Yes, a Marine. He left when I was very, very young. I don't even remember his face.
And you were raised by your mom, right?
I was raised by my mom. My mom was unfortunately sick off and on, and because she dealt with bipolar disorder. And back then, I mean, we know more about mental illness now. Back then, the common terms of having mental breakdowns, having a nervous breakdown was like a common thing. So my mom spent a lot of time in hospitals. My brother and I spent a lot of time living with random people that we met at church that took us in, and while my mom would be in the hospital for a couple months.
It's a crazy story. I think most people listening cannot even fathom what that must have been like growing up. And again, I'm looking at you now. You're a strong man. You're a doctor. You're a leader. So that must have been difficult, like getting from there to where you are today.
That was easy compared to what I've had to, like some other things I had to go through. I lost my mom in 2011 when I was at the beginning of my second year in medical school, and I didn't take any time off. I used that, and I used the hurt and the pain actually to make me into a stronger student. I don't recommend that because I should have learned how to grieve, and I should have taken time to grieve. But moving around was not the hardest part of my childhood at all. It was probably the easiest part of my childhood.
So I have not had those experiences, so I can't even imagine. But on one of the podcasts I was listening to you talking about, living in a car and not having a home. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My mom, because of her disorder, we basically moved every time she wanted a new job or she got a new boyfriend, right? So that meant we moved quite a bit, right? And we left on a whim from San Diego, California, and we were moved up to Oakland, California. At the time, we had family in Oakland, but we couldn't go stay with them. And I never really understood why we couldn't stay with them. But the car that we drove, we didn't have any place to stay. My mom didn't have a job up there. We went up there looking for work, right? Because my mom was under the impression that she could make more money as a nursing assistant up in Oakland, is what someone had told her. So we left with her boyfriend and we headed up there. Problem was, when we got there, my mom couldn't find a job, her boyfriend couldn't find a job, and so we were living on savings. And this is at the time Burger King had a promotion. It's like $1 Whoppers or 2-for-1 Whoppers, and we literally ate that for every meal, right? We didn't have enough money to go live in a hotel, so we lived in the car, right, in the parking lot of the mall. And then eventually the car broke down, and we couldn't survive. And we ended up in the homeless shelter right after that. My mom and her boyfriend parted ways, and my brother and I, we went to the homeless shelter to go check in because we were with her. It's a women's shelter, and that's how we got a room. And so we were in a homeless shelter a couple months, and the social worker there managed to help my mom get a job, and then we got a voucher where they paid for us for like a down payment for security deposit for the apartment, and they got my mom a job with temp agencies. So at one point she was working like 3 jobs to sort of make ends meet. And so she was like at one point pulling back in the old Frito-Lay factory before they had like all these automated machines. She would do the QC of the chips, the hot potato chips. And so she'd come home with grease burns on her hands. So I would put cocoa butter on her hands. The next day, she's back in a different job, and she's at a different job, and she's at a different job, all just to make sure that we had food on our table and we can eat.
And I think listening to your story, and again, obviously we're going to talk about you in medical school and get to that point. But one could imagine that maybe you'd be upset with your mom that you weren't given maybe opportunities that other people were given to. But, I heard in one of your interviews, you just saying, how strong your mother was and how much you looked up to her.
My mom was not perfect by any means. And my relationship with her was different because when my biological father left, I no longer could be a kid, and I had to watch out for my mom and my brother. And as she got sicker and couldn't work anymore, my relationship became more like a parent to her as opposed to her a parent to me. My mom, I played college basketball. I ran track. I was a pretty good high school basketball player, which is why I made it to Division I college basketball. My mom never saw me play one game. She never saw me run one race in track. I played on TV in college. She never watched one game. She didn't come to my college graduation. She died before I can go to medical school. Like the things, me and my mom, it was a contentious relationship, but you only get one mom, right? So I always hold her in that esteem. But we had an interesting relationship that was really strained by the fact that she had her disease and she struggled with that, right? And she did her best. My mom was highly functioning for a long time, but if you can imagine trying to take care of two growing boys, I mean, I'm 6'2", 210 pounds now. Back then, I used to eat like I was 6'2", 210 pounds when I wasn't. All right. And then my older brother, like trying to take care of us, she really pushed herself to the limit. And she's the one who taught me hard work. So she would tell me, if you can't come home and look yourself in the mirror and say honestly that you worked your hardest that day, then that was a failure on that day. You wasted your time and you wasted everybody else's time. So I no matter how smart people may think I am, no matter how gifted people may think I am, no one's going to outwork me ever, right? Because my mom, that's how I got where I am, is by hard work. It just so happens that I'm smart.
That's amazing. I mean, that's, we've gotten a lot of advice. One of the questions, you're answering my last question. You're ruining my big question. My big question is, at the end, and again, you're giving me the answer now, and I'm just going to take it. But I always ask, give me a piece of advice that someone else gave you that you would pass on to others. And I think that's the advice, right? I mean, from your mom to you, and that's how you got, we're going to hear the rest of the story, but that's how you are where you are now.
I have never walked into a situation ever, right, where someone just said, oh, you belong here, right? Ever. I love KCOM and I love Kirksville. I love them to death because they gave me an opportunity to be a surgeon. They gave me an opportunity to be a doctor. They set me up very well, right? But even there, I walked into there and the first thing that was said to me was that, hey, African Americans need tutors here. Well, here's the thing. I may not have considered myself smart. I know how hard I work. I never needed a tutor in my life. So why would I need a tutor here? And let me caveat that. The one time I got tutoring was because my SAT score needed to be raised 200 points. And I had no clue how to write a paper, and my grammar was terrible. So my English teacher spent time with me, helping me to learn how to read and write better. That's the tutoring. That's the only time. And her name is Margaret Shook. I owe her for being able to get me. I already had a qualifying score to play basketball, but I didn't have a good enough SAT score to go to the Naval Academy. And she pushed me and gave me the tools that I needed in order to get there.
David, I'll tell you, it's so interesting to me. I live on Long Island in New York, and like everybody wants a tutor, and you're saying you don't want a tutor. And I feel the same way as you. Like I like to bootstrap. Like I want to know that I did it myself, and I think full respect for that.
The problem is if I would have used a tutor, people would have used that to say that's the reason why I obtained something, right? Oh, it's because he had help. No, I don't. You're not going to get to downplay any success. I did this, right? I put that work in. I went in medical school, I treated it like a job that I went and put 40 to 50 hours in a week. So people would ask, well, did you do any all-nighters? The answer is no. I was asleep. As long as I wasn't out partying with friends, I was asleep by 10 p.m. at the latest every night. And I woke up at 5:30 to 6 a.m. and I'm in the library studying before anybody else. And I put my hours in. So when people say, well, did you get a tutor? Did you get help? The answer is no. I was helping others because I was sitting there. When it was frustrating, I went and asked questions. I found other resources, and I put that work in. A lot of times when you're African-American, people like to qualify things. Hey, you only became a surgeon because you're African-American. You only got into medical school because you were filling a quota. I only went to the Naval Academy because I was an athlete. I've heard it my entire life. I'm not going to lie. I got there on basketball, right? I had, my grades weren't amazing in high school. I missed the entire semester my junior year, and I almost didn't graduate high school. If I didn't take the number of classes, and my school, my senior year that I transferred to was flexible in giving me the opportunity to take junior year and senior year classes at the same time, I wouldn't have graduated on time. Just would not. I wouldn't have graduated. It would have took me an extra year, which was not a thing, right? I wouldn't have graduated. And so, did I get into the Naval Academy of basketball? Absolutely. Did I ever struggle academically at the Naval Academy? Absolutely not. Not one time. And I slept through class, and I did this, I did that. One thing about me growing up, no one ever taught me how to study. Like, that just wasn't a thing. I was a good basketball player. On every test, I always got the answers correct.
David, you don't have to convince me that you're a smart guy. This is my third time hearing you speak. If, God forbid, I need my gallbladder out, I'm flying to Guantanamo Bay and you're going to do it for me. So definitely do not need to convince me. So David, just for our listeners, the Naval Academy, because they may not know what the Naval Academy is, that is one of the elite military colleges in the United States. Is that right?
Yes, it is the number one service academy in the United States. And it is consistently ranked in the top 5 academic institutions in the United States. One of the elite academic institutions in the world.
So that's incredible. So you came from very difficult home situation. You played basketball and ran track and went to one of the best universities in the country, if not the best. Again, I'll take my disclosure. I don't want to insult anybody, but if not the best academic institutions in the United States. And you played NCAA, 2 sports at 2 NCAA sports. I'm not saying anything wrong, right? That's true.
No, that's absolutely correct.
And you studied your butt off, and you fell asleep in class. It sounds like I don't even know how I get to class doing all that. So I'm again impressed. My question for you is, you said that you didn't always know that you wanted to be a doctor and you thought you might want to be a judge. When did you decide you wanted to go to medical school, and what was your med school applications like?
So I broke my wrist my junior year, and that was the first time I was in an operating room that I can really remember. And there's not as a doctor. It's in high school. I broke my wrist junior year, and I just remember this warm happiness feeling being in the operating room. Maybe it was the anesthesia. All right. But then I went to the Naval Academy and I validated some science classes. And so what that did was it gave me the option to start working on major classes early. I had no clue what I wanted to major in, had no clue really what I was going. The only thing I cared about at the time was just playing basketball. But I've always liked science, and one of the classes that was available to me was biology 1, right? And so I just signed up. And so I show up to class, and it turns out the only people taking biology at the academy are people who are going to medical school, because the academy doesn't have a pre-med major. So you have to take all these classes on top of whatever your major is. So there are extra classes that people just willingly take. And so I get in there, and there's seniors in there, there's juniors in there, and I'm a young looking freshman, like super young looking freshman. And I'm just quiet. And then the professor's going through asking people, what do you want to do when you grow up? And what are you using biology for? And I literally had no clue. And then come to find out, there's a guy by the name of Mike Zakharoff who's in the class. He's 1 year ahead of me. And he said, he knows right off the bat, well, I'm going to be a doctor. And so then I start asking around, like when we're in small groups, like, well, why are you taking these classes? And they're like, well, I'm trying to go to medical school. And I was like, man, if these folks are going to medical school, I'm the only freshman in here. Does that mean I can go to medical school? Right? Because I started looking around, like, there's a reason why I'm in the class. So I went and asked the question, how do you get to medical school? And I managed to get an advisor who just happened to be the advisor for the pre-med stuff at the academy. And he sat there and was like, yeah, David, medical school is an option for you. And all of a sudden, my world just opened. And I was like, whoa, I never thought about this. But then what really pushed me towards it was people start laughing at me when I said I was considering it. So then I was like, fine, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I've always proved everyone wrong. I'm going to prove you guys wrong. And so I just started pushing towards it. And it was tough. I mean, imagine being a college basketball player at a place where majority of the athletes at the Naval Academy are typecasted into doing non-science majors, right? Because it's easier to maintain when you're out on the road, you're playing, you don't have to worry about labs and all this crazy jazz, and people can help you out writing a paper. It's hard for them to help you out when they can't do the chemistry assignment, or they can't do the math, and they can't do the physics, right? And so you're just left on your own. And that's essentially what happened to me. I became like this lone wolf, this anomaly, and people were very upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, just for our listeners, again, my own experience, I was at a Division III school, nowhere near where you were, and I wrestled, in high school, and I started wrestling in college, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the sport and get into medical school. I would never been able to do it. So that, to me, again, is just a huge accomplishment that you're able to do the sport and still handle the academics at a top tier school. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to medical school right away, right? Because I never failed a class. I never got below a C. It became a lot, right? So by the time my senior year, I was like getting close. If I would have pulled off a 3.5 or above my senior year and applied for it, I probably could have got the medical assignment from the military. But I was honestly burned out, and I just wanted to have fun. So I was like, I'm going to put this off for a couple of years. And so I ended up going into the nuclear program to start with, which is like something you got to interview for, you got to have a certain aptitude for, you got to pass a bunch of sort of hurdles. And I got into this elite nuclear program. Being in a nuclear program, I was originally supposed to be a submarine officer, right? Go drive subs, be an engineer on a submarine, be a nuclear engineer, right? Be part of the nuclear engineering program for the Navy. It's a very hard program to get into, and it requires you to do a set of interviews with people who are subject matter experts who are engineers. And during the interview, any class that you've taken while you're at the academy or in college, if it's on your transcript, it is fair game for them to ask a question from that class. The other thing is you have to talk through your answers while you're answering the question, and they give you a pen and paper, and you can't use a calculator. And it's timed.
All right, I don't want to take that. I don't want to sit on that. I'll pass on that one. I think I'm just going to.
And I passed no problem. Which people were very surprised. And again, I heard, well, how did he make it? Right. And so I've sort of just been fighting that stigma the entire time.
So you were nuclear. What's the title?
So I was a submarine. I was in a nuclear pipeline. I never actually made it to a submarine because what ended up happening is like you need your medical waiver to be cleared so you can actually like be cleared to go on a submarine. And I never got that. I never got that clearance. But when it ended up happening, it was a blessing in disguise because I had a degree in applied mathematics. And so I got a call and said, hey, do you want to become a cryptologist?
Okay, and a cryptologist is code, like secret code, mathematical code. That's cool.
Yes.
That sounds really cool.
I went and did that, and I worked in cybersecurity. I got a chance to do some really cool stuff, and then I went to medical school.
Okay, so can I just tell you, if anybody calls you and says anything about any of your credentials or how did you get here, can you just have them call me and I'll tell them that it's crazy.
Oh, I still deal with it today. I still absolutely deal with it today.
So tell me, how did you first find out about osteopathic school? And can you tell me how you ended up in Kirksville?
So I work extremely hard, right? Part of working hard is I stay up and I read. As soon as I'm like a pit bull when it comes to goals, right? If I set a goal, I try and get a background knowledge of everything. So what I did was when it came time and I finally settled down, I was like, I'm going to go to medical school. I went and found every resource that I could, and I read everything that I could about medical schools, right? So back in the day, I don't even know if they still have it. AAMC has a booklet that used to have all the stats of the medical schools for the MD side. I read through that about a couple times, and then I would just Google stuff like, hey, I would just type in medical school. And then I think I came across osteopathic medical school, right? And I came across KCOM. And so I was like, well, what's this? And I started reading, and I'm like, that sounds like I'm a former athlete, whole body. I really believe in nutrition. And so I didn't really understand it right away. But then, like, the more I learned about it, I was like, this is more in line with what my mentality was. The reality is I'm from an underprivileged background. And I knew that unless someone really looked at who I was as a person, they were probably going to throw my application right off the bat, right? Just throw it in the trash right away and be like, oh, he's not a good candidate. My MCAT score wasn't the highest because, again, I was still struggling with the verbal component, right? Just like I did with the SAT. My math and science scores were, without a question, very great. And so I knew that if I couldn't get past someone actually taking a second to read my personal statement to find out who I was as a person, I wasn't going to get into school. So I was actually deployed down here to Guantanamo Bay back in 2009. And I applied, I think I probably applied to at least 60, 70 schools back then, right? A lot of money that I had saved up. And I was under the impression that I was going to get multiple interviews and I could do them all during a 1 week block, sort of set time frame, because I couldn't be gone from my deployment for too long. And KCOM was the first school to give me an interview. So I set it up and I scheduled everything around there. And there's one MD school, Howard University, that I thought they were going to give me an interview. And I was going to interview then and there. So they never sent their interview invite. And they stopped answering my calls afterwards, stopped answering my emails. So here I was thinking I'm going off the island for this week block to try and get these interviews done. And I thought I was going to have multiple, and I didn't only have any one. And so I went to KCOM, and they just made, you could tell that they knew my application, right? Because they were able to quote things from my personal statement that was deep in my personal statement. And Miss Donna Sparks was like, hey, your application got pushed to the side, and I happened to pick it up, and I just started reading your personal statement. It was like, your personal statement is what sold me on you coming. I interviewed on a Thursday. This was back when Dean Slocum was the dean. And Donna Sparks called me the next day, right? I was flying back to Cuba on a Friday. And she called me. I interviewed Thursday. She called me Friday night and was, hey, we wanted to rush your interview package through and get an admissions decision because we know you're flying back to Cuba. I wanted to call you personally and let you know you got into Kirksville. And I said, I honestly started crying, and I said, I accept, and I'm going. I was like, I'm a loyal person and I'm going. So I went back to Cuba and I got more interview invites and I declined them all. Declined every single one of them. I got some more interviews. I declined them all. So when I got to Kirksville, I never had a problem academically. I mean, I graduated near the top of my class.
And did you have a good experience while you were in Kirksville?
I had an amazing experience. Amazing experience. If I had to do it all over again, I would go to Kirksville in a heartbeat. It's without a doubt in my head.
David, when did you decide that you wanted to be a surgeon? At what point did you decide what you wanted to do?
So there's a surgeon by the name of Kent Blanky, right? So I thought I came into medical school. I had, as a DO, we do a lot of shadowing in order to get into school. And so one of the people I shadowed was an orthopedic surgeon. He wrote one of my letters of recommendation while he was still a resident. And I always felt at home in the OR, right? He was a former athlete, so I saw a lot of myself there, and I just got along well with those surgeons. But obviously, as a medical student, you really don't know until you're exposed. And so first year at Kirksville, you get an opportunity to do like sort of shadowing the hospital as part of the curriculum, right? Where you get to go spend time shadowing in the office as a first year. So I got assigned to Dr. Kent Blanky, who was a cardiovascular thoracic surgeon at Northeast Regional in Kirksville. He took one look at me and was like, "You're a surgeon and you don't know it yet." It's like, by the time I'm done with you, you're a surgeon. You're going to be a surgeon. And he said, "You're going to show up here at this time. You're going to round. You're going to do this. You're going to do that." And I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. So then I would go around at the hospital with those guys, go learn, go sit in the OR. And then I do my schoolwork later, like go study and do all that stuff later in the day. And it's funny because last year I became board certified, and he was one of the board examiners. He wasn't in my room, but he looked at me and was like, "Yeah, you're passed." He was like, "I told you 10 years ago you were a surgeon."
Sometimes doctors just meet one person that kind of changes their whole path. Do you think that that's what it was? Do you think it was him, or do you think you just realized at that point that that's what you were meant to do?
He gave me confidence to know that that's what I was meant to do. And originally, I fell in love with neurosurgery. I 100% fell in love with neurosurgery, to the point that my third year, every Saturday and Sunday, on my quote-unquote days off, I would go spend time in the OR just hanging around the neurosurgeons and rounding with them, changing dressings, whatever I could to get neurosurgical experience. I did this my entire third year, from start to finish the third year.
So how'd you finally decide on general surgery? And then how'd you pick a residency, or how was your residency application?
So I ended up in general surgery because of discrimination, just flat out. I was flat out told in April at the end of my third year, going into my fourth year, I was flat out told that someone like me would not become a neurosurgeon. And obviously I was going back in the military, and this person had a lot of control over my career. And he just flat out told me, "I will never let someone like you become a neurosurgeon." And that's how I ended up not in neurosurgery. And so I had to really do some soul searching and really figure out what it was about medicine, because my dream had gotten taken away, right? Because now I had envisioned myself being a neurosurgeon. It still hurts to today, not because I'm envious of the lifestyle that they have. I definitely don't want to have that lifestyle, and I'm glad I am where I am. But I felt like my dream, I never got a chance to really see if I can make it. He flat out told me, "You can have general surgery or orthopedics." And I had no clue which one, right? Because they each fulfilled a little check in the box. But when I did some soul searching, I was like, I just want to be in the operating room. I want to be able to do some procedures in the operating room. If you're going to take everything away from me, I'll do OB in order to get into the operating room. I'll do this. I want to be in the OR. I feel at home in the OR. I feel happy in the OR. And he took neurosurgery away from me, but he couldn't take that away from me, right? And so that's the reason why I ended. So I ended up doing 25 total interviews between orthopedics, general surgery, both civilian and in the military. I didn't know which specialty I was going into until the military match, which was in December. I had no clue. So then when they gave me general surgery, it was actually my 5th choice. Now, mind you, I had an outstanding step 1 score, outstanding step 2 score on both the USMLE and the COMLEX. I was near the top of my class, had publications, every check in the box you can think of. And I ended up with my 5th choice. Because during my interviews, things like "you're too much of a leader" were used as a way to justify not selecting. So I mean, during my interviews, I got told like flat out, "Hey, we're going to select you number 1. We're going to select you." And I couldn't really figure out what it was. So I felt good going into the match. So I knew I was going to match somewhere, whether it was orthopedics or general surgery. I knew I was going to match somewhere. And now intern year is just tough for everybody. So I ended up matching at a program that I will, now I'm an attending and I'm no longer a resident, I will flat out say it was malignant beyond belief. And that program, I had a lot of red flags and I did not see them. And I was miserable for 3 years while I was there until I transferred. Absolutely miserable. So miserable that I honestly thought about calling the Navy and asking them to deploy me to Afghanistan because I would have had more fun there.
Ooh, not a good analogy, obviously, yeah.
But that's literally how miserable I was. Like I was so miserable that I thought about quitting medicine altogether. That's how miserable I was. Because that place was so malignant that it sucked the joy out of being a surgeon.
So where did you go after that?
So I left and I ended up transferring to a DO program that was in the midst of transitioning to an ACGME program. I got my confidence back. I felt valued. Now that program wasn't perfect, but what it did make me feel like was that I was going to be a good surgeon. I was going to be okay. That my time and my skills were going to be utilized appropriately. And they flat out gave me an opportunity to succeed. And I'm forever grateful to Beaumont Health System in Trenton, Michigan for that opportunity, right? Because I transferred as a PGY4 into a program which is unheard of, right? Because PGY4 spots don't come along. It's a 5-year program. Now, did I give something up? Oh, absolutely, right? Because I trained in the ACGME program for the first 3 years of my residency. My 4th year, we were in the pre-accreditation status and we were submitting our application. And when it came down to full accreditation for the ACGME, they didn't backdate it that 1 year. Well, because of the ABS rules, I could not be board certified from the ABS. And I had to justify, and I sent the letter in, we all sent the letter in, because I did not do specifically my 3rd, 4th, and 5th year in the ACGME program, I could not be board certified through the ABS. I had to go through the ABOS. It's nuts, right? But again, here go. The DOs were like, "You're a surgeon? You train in our program? We're going to take care of it." I can't argue with that, right? I can't argue with that.
Okay, so you finish in Michigan, and then after that, now did you take loans for medical school, or was it military?
So the military paid for 90% of everything, and let me say, they paid for all of my tuition, board, fees, books, stuff like that. But I had been financially responsible for my mom since the age of 16, right? And so all of a sudden, I had to take out some student loans to make sure that she had the money that she needed, right? So that's where my student loans come from. And then senior year, when you're going on interviews, that I had to take out student loans for that too, right? And I told you I went on 25. That amount of traveling, that costs money. And so I had student loans for that. But other than that, I didn't really have the need for student loans.
So you finished your residency. And is that when you took the job in Guantanamo Bay? Was it right after?
No. So I was staff for a year at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, where I was a part of the residency faculty for the general surgery training program there. And so then I'm down here for a year, and then I'm headed back to be faculty again.
Are you excited to go back, or are you going to miss the water and the dolphins?
No, I am very excited to go back. My family is not down here with me. I'm down here by myself for the year. My 3 kids and my wife are all back in Virginia. So I am itching to get back as soon as possible.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's crazy. So now you're obviously, you just told us you're married and you have 3 kids. Would you tell your kids to go to medical school or to be a doctor? What do you think of that?
It's funny because my youngest daughter, who's about to be 2 this week, she has she has one of my old stethoscopes. And so she figured out how to use it. All my kids figured out how to use it. But she just unprompted said, my wife, who's a nurse practitioner, was like, "Oh, what's that around your neck?" She was videotaping. She said, "A stethoscope." And she's like, "Oh, what do you use that for?" She was like, "Well, I'm going to be a doctor." And she's like, "Well, what's your name?" "My name's Dr. Rhoiney." And so kids think I'm Superman. If they never become a doctor, I'm fine with that. I will never push them into this. What I do want them to learn is things that I didn't have the opportunity. I want them to learn early on financial literacy. I want them to learn health literacy. I want them to understand that there are possibilities to obtain success that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go to college for, right? Because at the end of the day, whether you're an electrician, you're a plumber, you're a carpenter, you're a real estate agent, a real estate broker, there's a lot of professions that you can be very successful for and happy. The reality is, I love being a surgeon, but I would give this up today and live a 9-to-5 life where I'm a blue collar worker if that meant my mom was going to be alive. If that meant that I did not have to go through the childhood that I went through to get to this point, right? Because the adversity would shape me and who I am and who my brother is what led to me getting to this point. So that was the impetus to get me from a lower socioeconomic class to where it is. If I didn't go through all that trauma, I wouldn't be here. A long answer, let me make it short, is if my kids want to become doctors, great. If they don't want to become doctors, great.
I interviewed another doctor a few weeks ago, and I think he echoed your sentiment. You may know him, but he had given a lecture that I watched, and we talked about this. He quoted Frederick Douglass in his lecture, and he said, "Without struggle, there is no progress." That was
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you would agree with that? That's kind of your theme.
Absolutely. What I am fighting for is the opportunity to choose, the option to choose, right? Because I didn't have a choice. I was at the very bottom. There was either you succeed or you go to jail. You succeed or you die, because we were poor. So if I gave up, there was nowhere to go. I was at the very, very bottom. What I want is my kids to have a choice in life. Now, what I never want them to fail. I will be there to help them up, but I want them to choose the success that they want without having to worry about the financial obligations of it. And I want them to have this opportunity to succeed that is on par with everyone else in life.
David, you are such a strong person. And again, I can't thank you enough for your time and doing this interview with me. Can I just ask you if, there are some minority students, obviously you've given a ton of advice and just leading by example, just listening to your story and how successful you are and how strong you are. Let's say there's a minority student that's listening to us tonight and you can give them, some advice. Beside the things you've already said, what would you tell them if they want to go to medical school?
It's not going to be easy, but everything that is truly worth it isn't easy. If you are African American, you are Hispanic, you are Asian, you may end up being the only person in that class of that race, of that ethnicity, of that background. And it is not going to be easy. You're going to get things that are said to you that is not necessarily built out of ignorance and generated from ignorance. It is generated from a lack of knowledge, right? You might be the first person that they encounter who've had that type of background, and it is going to frustrate you. It will always frustrate you. That frustration is never going to go away. But you have to keep the bigger picture in mind. Those small little interactions, they don't matter, right? Because what happens is everyone has revisionist history. They're not going to remember that maybe they said something that was offensive. Maybe you did have it more difficult than them. What they're going to remember is you accomplished something that they also accomplished, but you did it with less. At the end, they're going to respect all of that, because when the maturity and the maturation process takes place, they're going to realize how special it was for them to have their world opened by someone with a different view.
And that answer is great. And David, I really appreciate your time.
Ian, thank you so much for having me.
All right, my friend.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.